When you open a RAW file, the Adobe Camera Raw dialog box will also open. Let's maximize the window and take a quick look at some of the commands available. The Camera Raw dialog box is broken into several tabs. We'll explore these deeper in later lessons, but essentially, you use these tabs for specific tasks. For example, you could adjust the white balance automatically, or take advantage of any of the presets, and these will give you the same sort of results as if you had adjusted it at the camera itself. I'll typically go with as shot because I usually shoot the correct white balance in the field, but it is easy to adjust after the fact, as well as take advantage of tinting to get the type of balance you want. That's looking pretty good. I'll just warm that up a bit. Next, you have the ability to adjust the overall exposure. Clicking Auto will work in most cases, and then you can utilize Contrast to adjust the overall contrast between the lightest and darkest areas, and then recover highlights or shadows. Notice how easy it is to adjust just the brightest region, as well as go after the darker areas, pushing them down or lifting them up a bit. Blacks and whites will work similarly, adding clipping and forcing the brighter areas to pure white and the darker areas to pure black. This allows you to achieve better contrast. The next set of adjustments allows for both selective saturation and selective contrast. Clarity is most useful as it really adds pop to an image, and you see there how it can put a lot of detail into the darker tones. I'll back that off a bit. Similarly, vibrance allows for selective saturation, and it boosts the saturation a little more naturally. Of course, you could take the overall saturation up, but I find vibrance does a much nicer job. Beyond this, there are several additional controls. I'll show you a few of my favorites. The tone curve option can be used to apply a simple curves adjustment, and curves allows for a little bit of a gentler transition in some of the different exposure areas. We'll explore curves much more later. Additionally, I'll take advantage of lens correction and enable the lens profile correction. This will go through as you see there, and it compensated for any unwanted vignetting at the edges and automatically corrected any distortion caused by the lens. Adobe Camera Raw is smart enough to look at the metadata that your camera will provide to the digital file, and it can look up a profile from Photoshop's extensive database. Under the Effects tab, you can take advantage of adding any selective grain in if you'd like to distress the image, or the ability to go ahead and put a bit of vignetting in, darkening the edges stylistically or brightening them. The nice thing with this vignette is that it'll adjust to the cropping. So if you need a particular target size, you could choose the aspect ratio, such as 5:7. And as I crop, I can go ahead and decide what I want the image to look like. There we go. I often find turning on some overlay lines helps me position. So I'll show the overlay and drag the crop, in this case using the intersection point for my subject there where it crosses. Let's press return. And you'll notice that the post-crop vignette automatically adjusts to match the cropping, hence the term post-crop. At the very bottom, you can click the hypertext to define how the image opens. I generally will open with a resolution of 300 pixels per inch and use the bit depth of 16 bits per channel. This gives us more accurate color. You could choose to sharpen for a particular use. I'll typically use glossy paper if that's how I'm printing, or for the screen for screen graphics. And then take advantage of opening as a smart object, which embeds the original RAW file into the layer in case you need to re-access Adobe Camera Raw. I'll click OK and then Open Object, and it will send the object onto Photoshop into a new document. If you need to go back to Camera Raw, a quick double click of the smart object will open up the Adobe Camera Raw dialog, where you could tweak the image and adjust the overall exposure a bit. Let's take clarity down and lift up our highlights a bit and our exposure. That's looking good. Tweak saturation, click OK, and you see the smart object updates for the new settings. That's just a quick look at Adobe Camera Raw. We'll explore it more in later videos.